Hey, hi, hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jordan, and I am so glad you're here, and I am so glad to be back. For those of you who don't know, I was traveling over the last couple of weeks, and I was also doing some pretty heavy work on my master's thesis, so I've been extremely busy, but I am so glad to be back and sharing more content with you guys. Now, the last video that I did, I started sharing about my bass pedal board, so you can check out the kind of overview video that I did up here if you're interested in that. This is part 2 of that series where I'm going to take a look at the first 2 pedals on my board. And to make it easier for you, I put some navigation links down in the description below so you can click where you want to if you are interested in one of those pedals and not the other, or if you just want to skip me talking. But in seriousness, thank you for joining me. I'm going to grab my bass behind me and let's start to dive in. Alright, so I've got my bass in hand and my pedals in front of me. Let's take a look at the tuner first. I've got the D'Addario pedal tuner. It's a chromatic tuner from D'Addario, and yes, that is how you say their name. I mispronounced it in my last video, and I apologize for that, but I went on their website, looked it up, and it is in fact phonetically pronounced. So it's D'Addario and not D'Addario or whatever the heck it is I said before, so sorry guys. Really, I like this tuner a lot. It's really rugged. It's got a nice metal enclosure. It has a really bright, nice display on it. I will show you what that looks like. So I've got it clicked on now, and I'm going to detune one of my strings so you can see what it looks like. As I get it to that sweet spot. And when it does get to the sweet spot, it has a nice big set of green arrows on either side and a couple of green lights on the top and on the bottom to let you know that you are in the sweet spot. And the other thing that's nice about it is it's chromatic. So I, as I mentioned in my last video, use an alternate tuning on my bass. So it supports the fact that I am not tuned to EADG like everybody else. Now, another thing that I like about it is that the power supply access is at the top of the pedal. I know a lot of companies get creative on where they put that, but I like the fact that this one's on the top. It's nice and clean, and it gets that out of the way. It's one less cable to go in between all the pedals on the board, especially when you're tightly packing them like I did here. So, A+. So in my experience, I found 2 downsides to this pedal. One, you might have noticed earlier when I clicked to engage the pedal, that switch is really noisy. You're not going to be able to hide the fact that you're tuning. So if you're trying to be stealthy about it, oh well. But usually in my case, there's something else going on stage whenever I'm tuning anyway. So there's enough noise that's going on to kind of block that out. Now I don't know if that's going to be the case in your situation, but just something to bear in mind, this switch is pretty noisy. So the other downside is that they built this functionality into the pedal where you can set your reference for the pitch of A to a different frequency. Now, a lot of pedals have, a pretty narrow range where they'll, go from like A equals 425 to 465 or something like that, whereas the normal, pitch that everyone uses as their reference pitch in most modern music is 440 hertz, right? But in this case, this one goes all the way from 415 to 475. The downside is the button to access that is right on the side of the pedal, very close to the input on the pedal. I've hit that accidentally a lot. Now, if you hit that just 2 times, it's going to be audible if you're tuning yourself to A equals 442 as opposed to A equals 440, and that might throw it off with the rest of your band. That's kind of not great. The other thing that's not great about it is there's only one switch. So I'll show you here. Right now it's set on 440. Let's say I'm plugging my cable in, the stage is dark, and I tap the button. Now A is 441. If I click it again, 442. Now remember the range that I said this thing goes to? All the way to 475. You can already see this is getting kind of tedious, right? Here we go, 475. And we click it again, what happens? It goes to 415. I just want 440. you can click and hold, and it kind of cycles through a little bit faster. But as you can see, there's like 60 different clicks or 60 different individual numbers that you have to go through just to get back to 440. So that's kind of a huge downside. D'Addario, if you guys are listening, huge improvement to this pedal would be an up and down arrow, or maybe just move those buttons to a different spot where it's less likely to get bumped, maybe like on the top, for example. So other than those two downsides, this is a great tuner. It has a fantastic display, and it's really rugged. I like it a lot. I do like it, but just bear those things in mind. So moving forward, we've got the Tech 21 SansAmp Programmable Bass Driver DI, which is a mouthful for this is a really cool DI that's on everybody's board. Honestly, this pedal is probably my favorite purchase of the year so far. I really enjoy what it does for my sound, and just how versatile it is, and the fact that I can program 3 different presets in this thing and kind of set it and forget it. Even if I bump the knobs, it's no big deal. I can just click back to one of my presets and no harm, no foul. But I'm going to go in a little bit more detail and let you kind of hear the pedal as well, because I didn't really get to spend a whole lot of time on that in my overview video before. I'm going to just kind of play some stuff and turn the knobs and let you hear what things sound like. Alright, so I've got my volume now back on. I'm going to show you my dry signal without any of my pedals on, both with and without a pick, so that you can kind of hear what it sounds like kind of on its own. Alright, so there's my dry signal. I'm going to flip on my first preset, which is what I'm on like 80% of the time at church. So right there you can already hear that it sounds a little bit more excited. It has a little bit of drive to it. It has a little bit of amp simulation going on as well, which is what this thing is designed for, which is great. Overall, it just sounds a lot better. It sounds a lot cleaner, and it cuts a little bit more too, which is kind of cool. So the next thing that I want to do is kind of just play a couple notes and turn the knobs and let you hear the range of each of them and kind of what they do. So the setting that I play around with a lot is the middle one. I like the first and the third one kind of where they're at, so I'm going to kind of mess around with the knobs on this particular one and then show you how to save a preset if you like the way it sounds. Alright, so first of all, I'm just going to kind of turn everything to a neutral spot. Now, if you look on my channel selector here, I've got a flashing light now. What that means is every time I turn one of the knobs, it's going to change how frequently it flashes. When I'm close to where it was saved, it'll start flashing faster. And then when I'm spot on, it'll go solid like that. And that'll be kind of an indicator of where that particular knob was when you saved that preset. And the same is true for each individual one. So right now I'm really far off because you can see it's flashing very slowly. As I move closer to the position where it actually was saved, which is almost all the way down on this one in this case because I was playing around with it, then it's solid. Alright, so let's kind of take this apart piece by piece, and you can see what everything does. So all of this should be fairly straightforward for those of you that have been playing for a while, but for those of you that have not, drive is kind of what it sounds like. It's overdrive, so it introduces a little bit of gain to your signal, gives you a kind of distorted sound. Bass and treble are your two EQ or equalizations, so you can affect the low frequencies with your bass control here, and the higher frequencies with your treble control. Now the downside of this is that it doesn't have a mid control, so the only way you can really boost mids is by rolling back the bass and treble. So that's kind of a downside. But other than that, you know, it's pretty good. And there are lots of instruments out there that allow you to compensate for that because they'll have a mid control right on the instrument. So the next one is presence, and that's kind of associated with the blend knob. The blend knob is the amp simulator. So when I've got that turned all the way down, we're just dealing with our dry signal. The more we turn this up, the more emulated amp sound we get. When you turn it all the way up, then you get all emulated amp sound. The presence knob is linked to that blend knob. So anytime you turn your presence knob, it can only be affected when the blend is engaged. So if this is all the way down, presence isn't really going to do anything. But when I've got my blend knob up, then as I turn the presence knob, I'm going to give myself a little bit more cutting highs as well. So it'll help you kind of cut through the mix a little bit more than just, say, boosting your highs. And then level itself should be, you know, pretty self-explanatory. Level is just how much signal you're sending out with the pedal. Alright, so right away you can see that that drive knob has a wide range from pretty clean to really dirty. So that's kind of cool. Alright, so now we're going to take a look at the bass and the treble, and I'm just going to play a note and kind of roll the dials up and down so you can hear the range that each of those knobs has. So they both support a pretty wide spectrum. I like the bass side of things a little bit better than I like the treble side. The treble is a little bit harsh for me. But other than that, those two knobs give a lot of tonal variation just between treble and bass. So you can kind of craft a pretty decent amount with it. Alright, so let's take a look at the presence and blend. So as I mentioned before, the presence and the blend are kind of tied together in this amp simulation part of the Sans amp pedal. So when I introduce the blend knob, I start to have amp simulation going on. Here's my dry signal, and this is it simulated through an amp. And honestly, I think it does a pretty good job. And as I mentioned before, as you turn the presence knob, you get a little bit more high end, so you can kind of cut through that mix a little bit more. So in my opinion, kind of like the treble knob, I think the presence knob gives you a little more boost than you would ever really need in any real situation. So you've definitely got enough boost if you want to do that to kind of cut yourself through the mix a little bit more. So A+, really like it. And obviously the level knob gives you a lot of variation. So if you're running the gain side of things, the drive side of things really low, you can compensate for that with the level knob really well, as you guys saw me doing earlier. So overall, this is a great pedal. It's got a nice solid enclosure, and it's so versatile. I'm only using it as an effect, but it's also a great DI as well. Definitely my favorite purchase of the year so far. Oh, and there's one other thing I wanted to share with you guys about what this pedal can do, and that's kind of the big thing behind this 3-channel version of the Bass Driver DI, is that it's programmable. So you can change different settings on here and then save them. So I'm going to show you how to do that really quickly as well. So on my channel 2 that I've been playing around with right now, let's say I really like how things are sounding right where they are. Okay, I like that a lot. So I've decided I want to save that and come back to it. So if I double tap, you saw the lights flash. That means it just saved that as a preset on my board. And now I can come back to that. If I click on any of these other ones and I come back here, I've got the same sound that I just set based on where the knobs are right now. Now if I change that and mess it all up and then leave, but then come back, no harm, no foul. So that's pretty cool. Alright, so that's all I wanted to talk about this time. I just wanted to say thank you for being who you are, thank you for letting me be who I am, and thank you for being a part of this journey with me. It's been a blast so far, and I can't wait to share more with you. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you in the next video. Be well.